November 1944, somewhere over the Rhine Valley, Lieutenant Edward Schluter is flying night patrol when something appears off his wing, a glowing red sphere, keeping perfect pace with his fighter plane. He banks hard. It follows. He dives. It matches every maneuver with impossible precision. His radio crackles. Other pilots report the same thing: balls of light, sometimes red, sometimes orange, sometimes silver, shadowing their aircraft across German airspace. They call them Foo Fighters, borrowing the name from a comic strip. Intelligence officers take reports, file them, classify them. These weren't hallucinations. Hundreds of pilots reported them. Radar operators tracked them. Gun camera footage captured them. Then the war ended, and the files disappeared into vaults where most remain sealed to this day. I'm not here to convince you of anything. I'm here to present documented military encounters during World War II that defy conventional explanation. Events witnessed by trained observers, recorded in official reports, and then systematically buried or dismissed. If you're drawn to historical mysteries that were witnessed, documented, and then quietly locked away, this investigation will interest you. These aren't folklore or urban legends, they're military incidents that someone decided we shouldn't examine too closely. Leave a comment if you know of other wartime anomalies that fit this pattern. The Foo Fighter phenomenon began in earnest during the fall of 1944. Allied pilots flying missions over Germany and occupied Europe started reporting encounters with objects that shouldn't exist. These weren't conventional aircraft. They moved with acceleration profiles that would pulverize any human pilot. Lieutenant David McFalls described them as 10 inches in diameter, glowing red-orange and flying in perfect formation. Captain Fritz Ringwald reported a dozen of them, in 2 lines of 6, flying at high speed. The objects would approach aircraft, pace them for minutes or hours, then accelerate away at impossible velocities. Military intelligence investigated. The initial assumption was German secret weapons, perhaps some new form of radar-guided anti-aircraft technology. But the objects never attacked. They observed, they followed. They demonstrated capabilities that exceeded anything in the known arsenal of any nation. Pilots tried to engage them. Gunners opened fire. The objects simply moved out of the way with impossible precision, then resumed their observation positions. Some reports described them phasing through solid aircraft without impact. Others reported temporary electrical failures in their vicinity. Radios went dead, instruments malfunctioned, then returned to normal when the objects departed. After the war, captured German intelligence revealed they'd been experiencing the same phenomenon. Their pilots called them Kraut fireballs. Japanese aviators in the Pacific Theater reported identical encounters. These objects shadowed aircraft from all sides of the conflict, suggesting they weren't any nation's secret weapon. Then the war ended. The reports stopped flowing. The files were classified. Decades later, partial declassification revealed thousands of documented encounters, but the technical analysis, if it ever existed, remained sealed. Official explanation: ball lightning, St. Elmo's fire, pilot fatigue. Ball lightning doesn't maintain formation flight. St. Elmo's fire doesn't follow aircraft through evasive maneuvers. Pilot fatigue doesn't show up on radar returns. The explanation doesn't match the evidence, and that's precisely the problem. October 1943, according to documents that may or may not exist, the U.S. Navy allegedly conducted an experiment at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard involving the destroyer escort USS Eldridge. The stated goal was to render the ship invisible to enemy radar using powerful electromagnetic fields. What happened next depends on which version of the story you examine. Some accounts claim the ship vanished entirely, reappearing moments later in Norfolk, Virginia, over 200 miles away. Other versions report crew members fused into the ship's hull, or driven insane, or phased partially out of reality. The Navy denies the experiment ever occurred. They state unequivocally that the USS Eldridge was never in Philadelphia during the alleged time frame. Official logs place it elsewhere. Case closed. But here's what makes this interesting. Carlos Allende, the man who first reported the experiment in letters to astronomer Maurice Jessup in the 1950s, provided specific details: names of crew members, technical specifications, dates. Some of those details checked out. Others didn't. When Jessup began investigating further, he died under circumstances officially ruled suicide. The Office of Naval Research did investigate degaussing technology using electromagnetic fields to make ships invisible to magnetic mines. This much is documented. Whether experiments explored other applications of electromagnetic field technology remains classified. Former crew members have come forward over the decades with contradictory accounts. Some claim they were there, witnessed impossible events. Others say it never happened. Some remember things they shouldn't remember if the official timeline is accurate. Their medical records, when they can be located, show gaps and inconsistencies. The problem isn't proving the experiment happened. The problem is explaining why so many people remember something that officially never occurred. The problem is explaining why the Navy continues to deny an event that should simply be forgotten if it was merely a hoax. The problem is that silence can be as revealing as admission. In the final months of World War II, as Allied forces closed in on Nazi Germany, intelligence units raced to capture German scientists and their experimental technologies. Among the most mysterious was a device described in fragmented reports as Die Glocke, the bell. According to testimony from former SS officer Jakob Sporenberg before his execution in 1952, Die Glocke was a metallic object roughly 9 feet wide and 12 to 15 feet high, shaped like a bell. It contained 2 counter-rotating cylinders filled with a mercury-like substance that glowed violet when activated. The device consumed enormous amounts of electrical power. Test subjects placed near the operating device experienced severe symptoms, metallic taste, sleep disorders, memory loss, muscle spasms. Several scientists working on the project died from exposure. Plant matter placed in the test chamber decomposed rapidly into a gray slime. The project was codenamed Kronos, suggesting research into time rather than conventional weapons. After the war, Allied investigators found the test site at the Wenceslas mine near the Czech border. The underground complex had been systematically destroyed. Support structures were demolished. Documentation was burned. Most of the scientists associated with the project had been executed by the SS as Soviet forces approached. General Hans Kammler, who oversaw Die Glocke development, vanished in the war's final days. His body was never recovered. His files were never found. American intelligence tracked him to Prague. Then the trail went cold. Some reports place him in South America. Others suggest he died in Berlin. No consensus exists. Polish journalist Igor Witkowski brought Die Glocke to public attention in the late 1990s, claiming to have viewed classified documents during a research visit. He described technical specifications, test results, project timelines. When skeptics demanded to see the documents, authorities denied they existed. When Witkowski requested another viewing, access was refused. The concrete structure at the test site remains a circular foundation with a unique pattern that doesn't match any conventional military installation. Radiation levels in the area remain elevated decades after the war. Soil samples show isotopic anomalies consistent with exotic particle physics experiments. What was Die Glocke? Anti-gravity research, time manipulation experiments, a radiological weapon. The fragmentary evidence suggests something that pushed beyond conventional physics. The systematic destruction of all related materials suggests someone wanted to ensure we never found out. Between 1946 and 1947, over 2,000 reports flooded into Swedish military headquarters. Citizens across Scandinavia were witnessing what they called ghost rockets, cigar-shaped objects, streaking across the sky at impossible speeds, sometimes leaving contrails, sometimes silent, sometimes exploding, sometimes crashing into remote lakes. Swedish authorities took the reports seriously. The military launched formal investigations. Recovery teams were dispatched to crash sites. Divers searched lake beds where objects had reportedly plunged into the water. The Swedish defense staff documented over 900 radar trackings. These weren't hallucinations or mistakes. Trained military observers were seeing them, and equipment was confirming their presence. The initial assumption was Soviet testing of captured German V-2 rocket technology. But the objects performed maneuvers no rocket could execute. They changed course mid-flight. They hovered. They accelerated from standstill to supersonic speeds without the characteristic rocket exhaust. Some reports describe them splitting into multiple objects or merging together. General James Doolittle arrived in Sweden to assess the situation for U.S. intelligence. British intelligence sent representatives. The phenomenon was attracting serious military attention from multiple nations. Crash recovery teams found impact sites but no debris. Lake floor searches detected magnetic anomalies but no wreckage. Then, as mysteriously as they began, the sightings decreased dramatically in 1948. The Swedish military issued their final report concluding the ghost rockets were likely meteorological phenomena misidentified by an anxious post-war population. This conclusion contradicted their own radar data and military observer reports. Declassified documents from the era revealed genuine confusion among military analysts. Internal memos expressed concern about the object's origin and capabilities. One classified report states the ghost rockets display characteristics inconsistent with known propulsion systems. Another notes possible directed intelligence in flight patterns. These assessments don't match the public explanation. Remote Swedish lakes still show unexplained magnetic anomalies at reported crash sites. Metal fragments recovered from some locations displayed compositions that don't match any known rocket or aircraft material from the period. Metallurgical analysis revealed unusual alloy structures. Those samples, like so many pieces of evidence from this era, have since disappeared from official custody. December 5, 1945. 5. TBM Avenger torpedo bombers liftoff from Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale for a routine training exercise over the Bahamas. Flight 19, led by experienced instructor Lieutenant Charles Taylor. The weather is clear, the aircraft are properly maintained. The mission is a standard navigation exercise they've flown countless times. 2 hours into the flight, radio operators at the base pick up confused transmissions. Taylor reports his compasses are malfunctioning, both his primary and backup. Another pilot confirms the same problem. They're disoriented, unable to determine their position despite clear visibility. We can't tell where we are. Taylor transmits, everything looks wrong. Even the ocean doesn't look as it should. Communication becomes increasingly garbled. Taylor reports they're passing over land, but according to their fuel consumption, they should still be over water. Other pilots report seeing the Florida Keys below them, then moments later, they're over open ocean again. The transmissions don't make geographical sense. They're describing impossible positions. The base launches rescue aircraft. A Martin Mariner flying boat takes off with a 13-man crew to search for Flight 19. Minutes after takeoff, the Mariner transmits a routine position report. Then silence. No distress call. No mayday. The aircraft simply stops communicating. The Coast Guard reports seeing an explosion off the coast, but finds no wreckage. 6 aircraft. 27 men vanished. The Navy launches the most extensive air and sea search in its history to that date. Over 300 aircraft. Dozens of ships. They comb 250,000 square miles of ocean and coastline. They find nothing. Not a life raft, not a piece of debris, not a fuel slick, not a single trace. The official investigation concludes pilot Era Taylor became confused, led the formation out over the Atlantic until they ran out of fuel. But experienced pilots don't become confused in clear weather with multiple navigational instruments. And simultaneous compass failures across multiple aircraft don't happen randomly. The official report itself notes the aircraft compasses were not functioning properly, but offers no explanation for this synchronized failure. More troubling are the details buried in the report. Multiple pilots reported seeing lights in the sky before communications degraded. Radar operators at several facilities tracked unidentified contacts in the area during the same time frame. These observations are mentioned in internal documents but absent from the public report. The Mariner's disappearance is explained as a fuel leak causing explosion. But Mariners were reliable aircraft, and experienced crews didn't make fueling errors. The reported explosion location doesn't align with the Mariner's last known position. Coast Guard vessels searching the explosion site found no fuel residue. No debris field, no evidence of any explosion. February 25, 1942, less than 3 months after Pearl Harbor. Los Angeles is on edge. At 2:25 a.m., air raid sirens wail across the city. Anti-aircraft batteries open fire on unidentified objects over the coastline. For over an hour, searchlights sweep the sky while artillery shells burst in the darkness. Hundreds of thousands of residents witnessed the event from their homes and streets. The official count, 1,440 rounds of anti-aircraft ammunition fired at something. Newspaper photographs the next morning show searchlights illuminating an object something solid enough to catch the light beams. Witnesses report a large, slow-moving craft that seemed impervious to direct hits. Some describe multiple smaller objects. Others report a single massive object hovering nearly motionless while shells exploded around it. Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox held a press conference the next day declaring it a false alarm caused by war. Nerves. The Army disagreed, issuing statements that the attack was real and involved unidentified aircraft. Two branches of the military providing contradictory explanations for an event witnessed by hundreds of thousands of people. Then the narrative shifted again. Perhaps it was a weather balloon, perhaps it was atmospheric anomalies. Perhaps it was mass hysteria causing anti-aircraft crews to fire at nothing. But anti-aircraft crews don't fire 1,440 rounds at nothing. Radar operators don't track nothing. Photographs don't capture searchlights illuminating nothing. Japanese records from the war contain no mention of aircraft over Los Angeles that night. They had no submarines in position to launch aircraft. They had no capability to send aircraft to Los Angeles and return. If it wasn't Japanese, what were they shooting at? Civilian casualties from falling shell fragments were documented. Several people injured, some property damage. The event was real. Something was real enough that military forces expended massive ammunition trying to destroy it. Real enough that it appeared in photographs. Real enough that it showed up on radar, but apparently not real enough to warrant a consistent official explanation. More unsettling are the radar reports from that night. Officers described contacts moving at speeds that shouldn't be possible for aircraft of that era, then stopping completely, then accelerating again. The objects displayed performance characteristics that wouldn't be matched by known aircraft for decades. These radar reports were classified immediately and remained so for years. 3 people died that night, not from enemy action, but from heart attacks during the chaos and from car accidents in the blackout. The Battle of Los Angeles caused genuine casualties, fighting an enemy that officially didn't exist. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Dayton, Ohio. For decades, rumors have circulated about Hangar 18, depending on the account of facility allegedly housing recovered technology that shouldn't exist. The rumors begin during World War II and intensify in the following years. Former personnel whisper about debris from crashed aircraft of unknown origin, materials that couldn't be identified, and wreckage that displayed impossible properties. What makes these stories compelling isn't their sensational nature, it's the pattern of credible people, risking their careers to discuss what they witnessed. Colonel Philip Corso, who served in Army intelligence, described seeing containers of recovered material at Wright-Patterson. His statements were made publicly, on record, with his full name and service history verifiable. During the war, Wright-Patterson served as the Air Technical Service Command Headquarters, the facility responsible for analyzing foreign aircraft and weapons technology. If unusual materials were recovered from any source, this is where they would be sent for analysis. The base had the facilities, the expertise, and the security clearance to handle highly classified materials. Multiple witnesses describe material with unusual properties: metal that returned to its original shape after being crumpled, material that couldn't be cut or burned, fragments with symbols or writing in no known language. These descriptions come from technicians, engineers, intelligence officers, people trained to identify and analyze materials. Senator Barry Goldwater, a major general in the Air Force Reserve, publicly stated he attempted to gain access to secure facilities at Wright-Patterson to examine rumored materials. His request was denied by General Curtis LeMay with unusual firmness. Goldwater later said, "I called Curtis LeMay and I said, 'General, I know we have a room at Wright-Patterson where you put all this secret stuff. Can I go in there?' He said, 'Not only can you not go in there, but don't you ever mention it to me again.' Official Air Force statements deny any such facility or materials exist. But denial of something's existence doesn't explain why access was so forcefully restricted. It doesn't explain why a sitting senator and Air Force general was threatened for inquiring. Normal classified projects have protocols for cleared personnel. They don't require that level of aggressive denial. Declassified documents revealed Wright-Patterson did house the Project Blue Book Office, the Air Force's official investigation into unidentified aerial phenomena. Thousands of reports were analyzed there between 1952 and 1969. The project officially concluded that no examined cases posed a threat to national security and that no evidence indicated technology beyond known capabilities. But if you're analyzing something you've already decided doesn't exist, What would your conclusion be? Former personnel continued to come forward, though most wait until retirement or later to speak. They describe being sworn to secrecy, threatened with court-martial, or told that what they witnessed never happened. The consistency of these accounts across decades, from people with no connection to each other, forms a troubling pattern. In the final years of World War II, as defeat became inevitable, elements within Nazi leadership reportedly turned to occult and esoteric research. The Vril Society, named after a fictional form of energy from a 19th century novel, allegedly pursued technology based on alternative physics principles. This sounds like fantasy until you examine who was involved and what they were attempting. Maria Orsic, a medium who claimed to receive technical information through psychic communication, led the Vril Society according to fragmentary records. Documents describe plans for circular aircraft using exotic propulsion designs that shouldn't work according to conventional aerodynamics. Some historians dismiss this as mythology. Others point to the fact that German scientists were indeed researching disc-shaped aircraft during this period. The Honeybu and Vril crafts, disc-shaped vehicles allegedly constructed by these groups, appear in documents that may be genuine or may be post-war fabrications. Distinguishing authentic Nazi research from Cold War disinformation becomes nearly impossible. But we know the Germans were working on circular wing designs. The Horten brothers built flying wing prototypes. BMW investigated unconventional propulsion. The question isn't whether they pursued unusual technology, but how far they got. After the war, Maria Orsic and several Vril Society members vanished. No records of their death or capture exist. Files related to their research disappeared. If the entire story was fabricated mythology, why systematically destroy all evidence? If it was genuine research into technology that didn't work, why not simply declassify it as a failed experiment? Operation Paperclip brought German scientists to America, including Victor Schauberger, who worked on vortex propulsion and anti-gravity theories. His research notes described using rotational forces to create implosion rather than explosion generating lift through entirely different physical principles than conventional aircraft. After his arrival in America, his research was classified. Schauberger died in 1958, days after returning to Austria from America. Before his death, he claimed to have been forced to sign documents, surrendering all his research and forbidding him from discussing his work. His family reported all his documents and models had been confiscated. What remained of his research was fragmented, incomplete, deliberately obscured. The Vril Society itself may have been partially myth, but the technology they allegedly pursued became the subject of serious post-war investigation. German engineers testified about disc-shaped aircraft projects. Some prototypes may have flown. Whether they used conventional propulsion or something more exotic remains unclear, because all related materials were classified or destroyed. Between 1944 and 1945, Japan launched approximately 9,000 balloon bombs toward North America, paper balloons carrying incendiary and explosive devices riding the jet stream across the Pacific. The Fugo campaign killed 6 people in Oregon and caused scattered damage. Most balloons fell harmlessly or were never found. But what makes this operation mysterious isn't what it accomplished. It's how the balloons found their targets with impossible precision. The balloons had no guidance system, no engines, no control surfaces. They were at the mercy of wind currents at 30,000 feet. Yet some reached strategic targets, power lines, forests, near military facilities, areas of value. Statistical analysis of where balloons landed versus where they should have landed based on random wind distribution shows anomalies. Japanese meteorologists had studied jet stream patterns and timed launches for optimal eastward travel. This much is documented, but some balloons appeared to make course corrections. Mid-flight witnesses reported seeing them change altitude or direction in ways that pure wind patterns don't explain. They found cleared areas to land rather than dense forest. They reached power infrastructure in remote regions. U.S. military investigated whether the balloons contained any form of remote guidance or control mechanism. Analysis of recovered balloons found nothing, just paper, sandbags, and payload. Yet the pattern of successful strikes exceeded random chance. Meteorology alone doesn't explain why so many reached valuable targets while others fell harmlessly into the ocean. More concerning were reports from radar operators tracking some balloons. They described unusual flight characteristics, sudden altitude changes without loss of gas that should accompany such maneuvers, prolonged hovering in one location despite high-altitude winds, then rapid acceleration. Radar returns from conventional balloons show steady drift. These showed something else. After the war, captured Japanese military records revealed they had expected less than 1% of balloons to reach North America. Their own calculations showed most would fall into the Pacific. Yet the actual success rate exceeded their projections by a significant margin. Japanese commanders expressed surprise at how many balloons found populated areas or strategic targets. The organ deaths occurred when a family discovered a balloon in the woods. As they examined it, the bomb detonated, killing a woman and 5 children. It remains the only documented deaths from enemy action on the U.S. mainland during World War II. The balloon had traveled thousands of miles across an ocean and landed in a clearing near a populated area. One tragedy among thousands of launches, but how many more found significant targets that were never reported? The official explanation is lucky meteorology and Japanese statistical planning, but meteorology doesn't explain course corrections. Statistics don't explain why balloons found power infrastructure in wilderness areas. And luck doesn't explain why so many exceeded their designers' own predictions. Operation Highjump, 1946, 1947. The U.S. Navy launches the largest Antarctic expedition in history. 4,700 men, 13 ships, 33 aircraft, led by Admiral Richard Byrd. The official mission, establishing research bases, mapping uncharted territory, testing equipment in extreme conditions. For a scientific survey mission, it was excessively militarized. For a research operation, it was heavily armed. Byrd's expedition was scheduled for 8 months. They returned after 8 weeks. No official explanation was given for the early termination. Byrd's personal log entries from the expedition describe unusual observations: warm water areas in regions that should be frozen, vegetation in areas where nothing should grow, and most controversial, openings in ice shelves that led to accessible interior regions. Upon return, Byrd gave a press interview stating the U.S. should prepare for the possibility of an invasion by aircraft that can fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. This statement was published in Chilean newspapers, but was quickly suppressed in American media. Byrd was debriefed by military intelligence and then maintained public silence about the expedition's findings. Official reports described the mission as successful. Photographs were taken, bases were established, research was conducted, but aircraft losses during the expedition exceeded what would be expected from weather alone. Several planes went down under unclear circumstances. Recovery efforts were hampered by what reports describe as unusual interference. Byrd led a second expedition to Antarctica in 1955-56, this time under international treaty provisions. After this mission, he gave an interview suggesting there was a land beyond the pole that was an enchanted continent in the sky. He died in 1957, shortly after this statement. His personal papers and expedition logs were classified and remain so. Antarctica today is governed by international treaty, with certain regions designated as off-limits for reasons described as environmental protection. Satellite imagery shows geometric features beneath the ice structures that appear artificial in their regularity. These are explained as natural formations, but the explanation requires accepting that nature creates perfect geometric shapes at regular intervals. Nazi Germany had also conducted Antarctic expeditions before the war, claiming territory they called Neuschwabenland. Some accounts suggest they established bases in ice-free regions accessible through cave systems. These bases were allegedly targets of Operation Highjump's actual mission. No evidence proves these bases existed, but military resources dedicated to the expedition far exceeded what a mapping mission required. Magnetic anomalies detected by aircraft during Operation Highjump indicated concentrations of metal or mineral deposits in areas where geological surveys suggested none should exist. These anomalies have never been explained. Attempts to conduct follow-up surveys of these areas have been restricted. What was Operation Highjump really looking for in Antarctica? What did they find that caused such a heavily equipped military expedition to return early and then classify their findings? These 10 cases span continents, involve multiple branches of military from different nations, and share a common pattern. Advanced or inexplicable phenomena were witnessed by trained observers. Reports were filed. Evidence was collected. Then the cases were classified, explained away with implausible official narratives, or quietly buried in archives where most remain sealed. The Foo Fighters followed aircraft from all sides of the conflict with propulsion capabilities that exceeded anything nations possessed. The Philadelphia experiment allegedly demonstrated teleportation technology that officially never happened, despite multiple witnesses remembering it. Die Glocke consumed scientists' lives researching something powerful enough that all evidence was systematically destroyed. Ghost rockets over Scandinavia displayed flight characteristics that radar confirmed but official reports dismissed. Flight 19 vanished with synchronized compass failures. The Navy called pilot error despite evidence suggesting electromagnetic interference. The Battle of Los Angeles saw 1,440 rounds fired at something that photographs captured but authorities couldn't consistently explain. Wright-Patterson allegedly houses materials that senior military officials aggressively deny exist while simultaneously restricting access. The Vril Society's occult technology research may have been myth, except German engineers confirmed disc-shaped aircraft projects that were then classified or destroyed. Japanese balloon bombs reached strategic targets with statistical improbability that meteorology alone doesn't explain. Operation Highjump mobilized massive military resources for an Antarctic mission that returned early and classified its findings. The pattern isn't one of failure, it's one of success that threatened established understanding. Technologies appeared that shouldn't work. Phenomena occurred that violated known physics. Evidence accumulated in official channels. Then those channels closed. Reports were classified. Witnesses were silenced. Materials disappeared. Files were sealed. World War II created conditions where conventional explanations were tested against events that exceeded them. In the chaos of global conflict, things were witnessed, documented, and filed away that in peacetime might never have reached official channels. The military infrastructure designed to track enemy threats instead tracked phenomena that fit no known category. What makes these cases compelling isn't sensationalism, it's the bureaucratic documentation. These events exist in official records. Military personnel filed reports using standard procedures. Intelligence agencies investigated using established protocols. Then those same systems decided these well-documented events officially didn't happen, or happened differently than hundreds of witnesses described. The technology demonstrated in these cases, if the reports are accurate, would have revolutionized warfare, transportation, energy production, anti-gravity propulsion, electromagnetic stealth, advanced propulsion systems, materials with impossible properties. Not science fiction, not theoretical. These were witnessed. Some were photographed, some showed up on radar, some left physical evidence. Then they were gone. Projects shut down. Research terminated. Scientists reassigned or silenced. Materials confiscated. Files classified. The systematic nature of the erasure suggests deliberate policy rather than random suppression. Someone, or some organization, decided these technologies and phenomena were too disruptive to exist in public knowledge. We are told these events didn't happen the way hundreds of trained observers described. We are told technologies that were demonstrated didn't work. We are told phenomena that radar confirmed were misidentifications. We are told evidence that was collected and analyzed shows nothing unusual. And when we ask to see that evidence, we are told it's classified for national security. The tragedy is not that these phenomena were mysterious. The tragedy is not that some cases remain unexplained. The tragedy is that we are prevented from examining the evidence ourselves. The files exist. The reports were filed. The documentation is real. But it remains locked in archives, stamped with classifications that may never expire, guarded by policies that decide we cannot be trusted with our own history. These 10 cases may be only fragments of a much deeper story, the visible tips of technologies tested, phenomena witnessed, and evidence collected during World War II that officially doesn't exist. What other wartime anomalies were documented and then classified? What other technologies were confiscated? What other witnesses were silenced? The evidence is out there, behind locked doors, behind sealed archives, behind classifications that may never be lifted. What else happened that we're not allowed to know?